Cool, thank you. So hi, as I said, my name is Jamie Walsh, and I was working on some of the work groups. That's where we sort of met. But I'm going to actually get this. So Gail and I have been talking for a while about how do we kind of make sense of just the incredible vast literature on behavioral science and make it like practically useful for practitioners. This is something that we've had many conversations about, especially as I start talking about randomized control trials and all these kind of other technical and jargony kind of expressions. So the idea of the behavior change decision tree is to try and take. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah. So it's. I think that was my fault. Right. Yeah. Yes. And then we just get rid of the display. Maybe.
Shake again, shake.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah. No, I can change the slide. It's just the only thing is with this thing. So. Maybe, yeah. Okay, is there a way to get rid of that? Here, see, there's a... Okay. Okay, so, sorry about that. So what is behavioral science about? Behavioral science is about cognition. What are the challenges with cognition? It's very, very messy. One of the reasons why economics dominated policy is because it gives these 3 or 4 simple prescriptions for how you should engage in your kind of your behavior change campaign. This is something that Toby mentioned earlier. You change the laws, you give people information, you change incentives. Once you start to introduce behavioral science based on the kind of how the mind works, there isn't this kind of very simple to apply, easy framework. And so, motivated by this, we thought let's try and kind of have a process that people can go through to kind of really narrow in on how to use behavioral science in a kind of pragmatic way for the problems that they face themselves. So this is like a list of all the cognitive biases that have been kind of found in the literature at various points. As you can see, there's like, actually, this is kind of too much information here. And like, so it can be very difficult to kind of really make sense of this. And so what we've tried to do, or what we're trying to do at the moment, and what this is really an attempt to get feedback on, is kind of try and deal with this information overload with a decision tree. And so the point here, so the kind of the idea of the decision tree is to kind of to get practitioners to go through a pretty simple process where they kind of go through those steps of engaging in behavior change, and really kind of it'll feed out some interesting information for the practitioner who wants to use behavioral science, if that makes sense. So what I'm hoping to do today is just give you kind of a taster of what we're kind of where the project is going, and then just elicit feedback from you guys in terms of how this can be improved. So really, while this looks like me giving a presentation, I think a better way to think about this is you to tell me kind of where you think that like this is going wrong, and like what can we do to make it better. So this decision tree has 6 kind of main themes. We have kind of the target group. That's kind of the customer segment, kind of the consumer archetype is one way of thinking about that. The target behavior, the consumption context, the target motivation, the intervention context, and the target frequency. These are kind of some of the core variables that we think will motivate the kind of the intervention that you're doing from a behavioral perspective. So, I want to make sure I click the right thing. Yes. Okay, so we kind of start, like the idea with the decision tree is to start with these three key actors: poachers and traffickers, law enforcement, and consumers. We think that these are the three kind of key agents in this whole business. And so we wanted to start from that perspective and start thinking about the kind of behaviors that they engage in. So when you take, for example, law enforcement, we thought there were kind of two behaviors that really mattered. Can you discourage some of the corruption that facilitates this? And how can you motivate law enforcers to be really enthusiastic about their work and help them be more effective? These are two areas that there is quite a lot of work done in the applied behavioral science literature around discouraging corruption and motivating people to work well. And so the idea here is that if this is something that you're working on, that you can kind of go through this aspect in the decision tree, and it will bring you to aspects of the landing page that you end up at the very end, can give you key information, either information itself or send you to resource guides that can help you with addressing these particular behaviors of this particular group. Similarly, the behaviors that we're thinking about when we think about consumers are, first of all, how can you discourage consumption, right? But then also, how can you promote alternative consumption choices? Because these seem to be the two things that come up again and again and again. Take shark fin, for example. We want to discourage shark fin, but frankly, if people are looking for something to do at their wedding where they're engaging in this prestige event, if you're not providing them with an alternative, you're not providing restaurants with an alternative, you're not going to get very far. So making that alternative consumption choice easier is another thing that I think a lot of times comes up in these kind of conversations. And then finally, when we're thinking about poaching, the kind of things that we're thinking about here are, first of all, how can you discourage it? And again, just some of the stuff that Toby said this morning offered a whole wealth of really interesting insights there. But then also, how can you promote alternative livelihoods? And I think one of the things that is a lot of this stuff has already been done at great scale, but even introducing behavioral science into this could actually be quite effective. My background is in development economics, and actually promoting alternative livelihoods is more my area. So the other thing that we're the next thing that we're focusing on, and this is primarily focused on the consumer end, but we do have motivations for some of the other actors and behaviors. But here in this particular focus, what we're thinking about are the drivers of the consumption: cultural, emotional, financial, functional, medicinal, nutritional, recreational, reputational, social, spiritual. Depending on the motivation, that will affect what kind of intervention you're trying to do. And so hopefully what we're thinking is by narrowing down those processes, we can again feed out information that's more relevant to you and send you to sources that are more relevant to you. The next thing is trying to target the frequency. And of course, there has to be simplifications that don't fit that well always, but we're thinking about in the decision tree that we have the infrequent, the once-off occasional, which might be once a year or once every few months, and then the more frequent and habitual behaviors. And the reason why we've broken it into these two categories is that they can actually motivate different ways of approaching the problem. If it's more habitual, you might want to start thinking about how do you intervene in habitual cycles. If it's more once-off and occasional, then we might want to think of this behavioral journey mapping in a more serious way, because oftentimes those are more deliberate decisions that engage there's a multi-step process on the journey towards taking that final decision. And then, I'm not sure if this is finally, but I think, so that the other issue is, where's the consumption context? So this is something that, at least in the measurement conversation, we talked about a lot. How you think about an online intervention is going to be totally different to how you think about a tourist intervention, where it's in the real market in, say, Bangkok or in Hong Kong, as opposed to a local market. So trying to provide informative guidance based on the behavioral science literature about how to intervene there, based on these things. And again, you can probably come up with many different categorizations, but these are in terms of motivating, actionable context, this is where we're going with this. And then this is the final slide, but I think we're also going to talk about measurement. That's something that came out of today's discussions. But in terms of the so the last question was around consumption. When is the consumption taking place? This particular context is around how is your intervention taking place. So will you be trying to engage through social media? Will you try to be going through public campaigns that are on PSA announcements on billboards, where the level of intervention is macro? It's you're not targeting specific people. You're creating these these kind of representations and icons in society where you're kind of trying to create the shared expectation that people have about whatever the kind of the messaging is? Or is this something in person? Is this kind of, for example, going to restaurants and getting them to change their behavior? Is it about kind of going to tourist companies about changing their behavior? Is it about kind of placing kind of product markets or going into places where something actually takes place and engaging with them directly? So this is, so I think I haven't put in a measurement slide because these are slides were made before the conference, but this is the direction we're going, and these are kind of some of the dichotomies that we're thinking about. But I would be very grateful for thoughts on kind of whether you think this would be useful and kind of any adaptations that you think might be good to incorporate.
Okay, thanks. Do you anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Can I ask what the output of this tree would look like? The decision trees I've dealt with previously are with economics or with risk analysis, where we would get a probability or we would get basically a dollar estimate of the different decisions. So what would the output of this look like exactly? Would it be more qualitative?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great question. So this is not like a Bayesian decision tree in any means. All this is like trying to tailor the information that we're providing to people's needs. Because if you kind of, as we've kind of discussed in the conference as a whole, people are focusing on very different things, and oftentimes how you deal with like ivory can be completely different to how you're thinking about a fish that's endangered. And so the rationale there is just to target this kind of immense amount of information towards what the needs are. But there's no kind of quantitative part to it.
So would the output be guidance?
Oh, sorry, yes. So what happens when you, okay, so that's a great question. So what will this look like from the user perspective?
Right.
Not that dissimilar to this. So as you're going through it, you can imagine going through and saying, well, I'm focusing on law enforcement. So you click on law enforcement. And then you would say, okay, well, I want to focus on discouraging corruption. So you click on corruption. And then you might focus on the motivational cluster. Now, for law enforcement, some of these things, like medicinal, is obviously not something that's going to come up. But something, for example, like financial is more likely to come up. There may be a social component to it. A lot of the times corruption is affected by whether everybody else is corrupt. The frequency will come up. Is this something that happens kind of very infrequently, or is it habitual? You'll be asked to focus in on that. You'll be asked to focus on whether kind of the context of this is online, or I mean, this obviously won't be tourist and local marketers or in a consumption context. And then whether the intervention will be kind of in person, online, or kind of in a public space. So that's kind of how it's going to look.
And then at the end?
Yeah, so that's all your inputs.
That's what you're clicking on.
So these are the inputs, and then the outputs is a landing page that kind of assembles the information that's relevant to you and guides you in the right direction. So the output will be a landing page within the tool.
Different resources that would be available.
Oh, so the landing page, sorry, will have resources on it directly and sources. Sorry, I should have.
Okay. Yeah. So basically guidance. Huh?
Looking for solutions.
Yeah.
No, I was just wondering what the output was going to be at the end. I was just wondering because in terms of decision tree, so it'll be a landing page to resources based on what you've selected.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what we have in mind, we're still sort of working up the exact format, and the aesthetic will perhaps look a bit different to this. But so we'll have a landing page, and it will perhaps refer to 2 or 3 models that might be especially relevant to that particular situation. And alongside that model, we'll show practical case studies of how it's been implemented, as well as opportunities to explore more through further research papers in particular. But it will all be designed and intended for people that are first being exposed to the opportunity of this model. So it's not going to be super technical. The idea is trying to give you an introduction into, okay, well, I know I'm supposed to use behavioural theory, but I have really no idea where to start. So that's the trick of the final bit of this. We have to kind of figure out what opportunities are there for a case study template, etc. But Yeah, that's the landing page format.
Sorry, that should have been much clearer. Sorry.
Okay, I'm coming over there. I'm coming over.
Thank you. Two questions, I guess. I mean, firstly, can you select multiple choices?
So we would think about the functionality. In principle, there's nothing that would prevent us from doing that. It may be, in terms of practical implementation on the back end of the decision tree, and we won't want to do that. For example, if we want the landing page to kind of be structured in a certain way so it's targeting towards behavior. But there'd be nothing preventing you from kind of doing the survey. Again, as you can tell, they're kind of, for every particular option, it kind of massively expands what the different options are. But the actual survey itself would be pretty quick one to do.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, especially like in terms of implementation context, you might want to select multiple. I mean, like, the person might want to do, two things instead of just one, for example.
Yeah.
And another question is just sort of, I guess, clarifying question. What does this got to do with the Mooc?
So the Mooc is a separate thing.
Right, okay, got it.
But that's actually a great point, and actually something that I'll incorporate there.
No, go first.
Okay, I'm coming to you.
I just wonder, like, what the landing page give the resources of that resource, the survey. So could it give like a suggestion who to contact, like expert, or among these the network we have here that we can actually collaborate or support in the future projects?
Yeah, so like guiding you towards specific resource people as well and their contacts.
Yeah.
And we would link, girls saying link to the expert directory.
That's a really good point. I mean, so again, because the landing page would be on the website, we could simply tag a particular expert to it. So that's very doable, yeah.
Okay. Jeremy?
Thank you.
Well, I'm just purely practicing. I'm not a web designer, but just thinking about that. If you don't want to just click one, and you can only click one of those, if you have a filter or three, a menu where you can tick more than one box, and then it filters them two or however many.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like that's all very doable.
Did you? I'm coming over there, but she's just got one more point. Yeah.
Sorry, a suggestion. I guess I really like sort of if we can sort of step back and look at, like I think Toby presented this morning, like so there's the use of regulation, incentives, and behavioral insights and all that. So I mean, so I guess let people think about, this is not the only way to do it. But like generally there's sort of like 4 approaches to change behavior, and behavior can be applied to all of them. Yeah. Okay.
That's a great point, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. This seems like a very ambitious and worthwhile project, so well done, guys. I do not envy the task of sorting and sifting reams of behavioural science research into these many permutations you're going to end up with, but good luck with that.
Thanks.
So I think you might want to be careful, and I think if I understand you correctly, you're presenting this as a sort of tool for helping people find guidance, rather than a tool for helping people design interventions, although you could sort of imagine it doing that. I think there would be certain risks associated with that you might want to think about. So, for example, you wouldn't want to restrain people's thinking and creativity too much. By presenting these sort of apparently discrete options, you might narrow people's creativity somewhat. But also, I think you have to be careful not to put the cart before the horse, or rather not encourage people using this to put the cart before the horse. So if you think about, some of these categories would be quite easy for people to select between. So if they're targeting either, law enforcement officials versus consumers, that's quite an easy choice to make, depending on people's interests. But then if you're asking them, well, are you interested in emotions versus financial motivations versus choice architecture versus whatever else, I mean, those things, they're not decisions you should necessarily come to a priori. They're things that should be based on a nuanced understanding of the problem and the situation and which of those are most relevant. So I think you want to be careful in how you allow people to sort of steer themselves to a false conclusion. And that might be addressed simply by having some quite useful guidance on those pages as to how they should be making that decision, what kind of things you mean by each of those categories, Because I can see how it's a very useful sort of sorting exercise of resource to help you identify. I mean, I would use it a lot in terms of identifying resources that were of interest to a particular subject matter. But I think if people start using it more in the way that a decision tree is conventionally used to really guide them, there's a bit of a risk that they find themselves going down one path, blind to what opportunities might have existed in the other paths. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. I mean, the assumptions of how the people are coming to it, whether they kind of already know what the motivations are or if they haven't figured those out, those are going to be really important. So I think your point about guiding, like what kind of level of information people are bringing to it, and so how that guides their assumptions and their decisions is actually going to be like a key factor in determining whether this is kind of pushing people down a very narrow path or really guiding them to kind of give them the right tools, having done already some of the important diagnostic work. That's a really good point.
Okay, any other questions or ideas with respect to this decision-making project, tree project? Okay, and do you have a time focus for this, or 2025 maybe, or 2030?
Sorry, I'm going to ask Gail.
March next year. Okay. March 2019.
2020. No, just kidding.
Okay.
So these all have been really fantastic feedback, and we'll be incorporating them. And I hope it comes across that this is really like a fact gathering exercise rather than a here's what we're giving you. And this is why these are simply icons from PowerPoint. The icons I hope will be a little bit fancier. But this has been really helpful. So thank you all.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, I'm going to give you an option, but you don't need a decision-making tree for it. How about we have a 10-minute coffee break? Yeah? 10-minute coffee break, and then we come back in and discuss the Mooc. But you've got to promise me you'll come back in before I let you out. Yeah? Okay, so 10 minutes, so I'll be ringing the bell around 4:30. Thank you. To discuss about the Mooc, and I'm going to hand over to Samir and Steve to talk about this.
Thank you. Steve, you want to go ahead or should I? So, Griffith University and Flinch Marketing have been assigned by Traffic to create this Mooc on SBCC, lots of acronyms here, for the issues that you guys are working on. So I would like Gail to come forward and kind of present her thoughts of what's the background behind this whole project. Gail. Okay. Our intent is then to spend next whatever time Karen allows us to get your feedback on what you would like to see in that MOOC, right? In terms of content and format. Massive online. What's the second O?
Open. Massive open online courses.
Massive open online content.
Courses.
Course. Maybe are you now withdrawing now? You can't even spell out MOOC here. Gail, so why don't you set the scene in the background of what led to you wanting to ask us to do this?
So I did one of these, a few other people in Traffic did one of these probably about 4 years ago now on behavioural economics, and it was a Coursera course, and I just found it a really great way to learn. It was extremely convenient, it was bite-sized chunks of video, additional research materials if you wanted to go in depth into a topic, an opportunity to submit questions to a lecturer and a real expert in the field. And with regards to social and behavioural change communications, there are so many topics where people ask questions. People are at very different levels of experience and expertise and perspectives. So we just thought it'd be a really great way to actually pull a lot of the stuff that we were finding together, bring it together in an online repository. We speak to you guys. We've interviewed quite a few of you and filmed a few of you before now. So it's a way to put all that into the toolkit in a very good kind of clean synthesis. I've suggested a 5-week structure. Whether these guys follow it or not, I think we'll perhaps explore that in a little bit. Do you want me to introduce the 5 weeks? Okay. So these were the initial sort of topics. They're quite expansive, really, in truth, and we've yet to kind of pin down the exact details of what will be in it. But it will be a mix of filmed content, so engaging experts to give their opinion on each of these topics in short, reasonably short, sort of 10 to 15 minute films. Just providing an orientation in week 1, so it's not going to run online for an entire week and then you're never going to be able to access it again. The idea is that at the start of each week something is launched and it's available to you. It will then be available throughout. It may be maybe a couple of films, 4 or 5 options on PowerPoint presentations, links to previous case studies, links to academic literature and research material. And then the following week you'll get additional content on the second topic. So week 2, we've had a really good roundtable here in Bangkok in August on exploring many themes around messaging. So that hopefully we'll pick up on some of the next steps with that. We're in the process of producing good practice guidance around when to use positive, negative or neutral message framing, so look out for that. Week 3 focused on messengers, so thinking about some of the research I know that Ali, for example, is doing at the moment on celebrities and when they can be used to best effect and when you actually want to think about trying to engage alternative types of messengers, perhaps less famous but more people that can reinforce the message day to day. The mechanisms in week 4, this is probably going to pick up on some of the things that Jamie introduced in the previous session. We've got to work out some more around the specifics for that, but trying to help people make choices, perhaps bringing in something about the behavioural journey mapping that we mentioned earlier today. And then the crucial kind of, as we've heard many times, reinforced thinking about measurement in week 5, and giving people some tools that they can use to strengthen their research into impact mainly, both for adaptive management principles, but also to actually assess whether they achieved what they set out to do overall. I don't know if that's kind of what you expected, but I hope you enjoy it. If there are other things that you would like us to pick up on, please get in touch with us.
Just to add to what Gail has said, we will try to bring some academic way of way of doing things. So we will have quizzes, some kind of pop quizzes around the content to kind of re-establish, re-emphasize some of the main points that we will be making. And just want to highlight that we are not the only 2 people who are doing this work. I have a team at Griffith. One of us actually is here, Yannick van Heerden. Sorry, I'm really massacring the Dutch name here. Who's busy actually video interviewing some of the experts in the room since yesterday. And then we have Professor Sharon Rendell-Thiele and Dr. Timo Dietrich, who all of us are academics in social marketing who are working on this. And then, of course, Steve has his team in Wellington in New Zealand on his side. So, Steve, do you want to say anything?
We look at the next slide.
Yeah, okay. So what we want to do next is basically around the table at which you're sitting, or should we have fewer tables, Karen?
Yeah, we should have fewer tables.
Okay. So let me complete my discussion and then we can jump into that. So what we want is to, the way Karen will determine how you rearrange yourself, we would like you to get into those groups and we would like you to answer these questions based on group discussion. Now, I would like the traffic coordinators hopefully to be at each table if it's possible. It seems difficult at this last minute to give this kind of instructions. So if you guys can assign a note taker and maybe summarize the main points and then share that on this post-it note, we will take your inputs which will influence the kind of content and format we will provide on the Mooc. And the timeline given to us by Gail is March 2020. Oh, sorry, 2019. I tried.
Okay.
March 2019. So.
Okay, so I just need to get you moving a bit. So I need to have at least 7 people at a table. 7 people at a table. So it might mean that you have to combine. If you have more, it's okay at the moment. Like you guys, you're already like 8-ish. But if I want to have fewer tables, we can shift in this direction. Shift in this direction. Because we're losing people. If you can move this way, Duran. Now I know your name, you're in trouble. Come this way. Yes. So we want to make full tables. So as Samia suggested, if you can assign a scribe, or you can also use post-its, up to you. If possible, somebody from the traffic team could be on each table. Yeah. So look around. If you have no traffic team member, shout at me. Okay. And this is only supposed to be for 15 minutes. So 5 minutes a question. 5 minutes a question. So the questions are, what lessons have you learned from using online training, if any? Yeah. So we didn't want to assume that everybody has done online training. But if you have any relevant lessons from online training, from the kind of thing that Gail has been talking about, please tell us what the lesson would be from your point of view. And then, who do you know beyond this community? So not the people in this room, but beyond this community, who you think could be interested in something like this Mooc? And what would encourage them to enroll, do you think? So how could we get people in the door? Yeah. You can also reflect on it from your own position. You know, would I enroll or not? What would make me enroll? Yeah. And then what specific recommendations, I'll put up the modules back again in a minute, would you have for the content? So what would you think is a good thing to learn about? Yeah. And how? Yeah, the format. You know, we talked here about video, quiz, etc. Anything else that you think would be favourable based on your experiences? So we're basically looking for feedback. Yeah. You guys are making a group of 2, is it?
We'll go and join.
Just to add 2 more points. Just to add 2 more points. Number 1, the first point, it is any kind of online training that you may have taken in the past, right? Not just something that is relevant to our field. Number 2, a question came up as to who is the target audience of Mooc, this particular Mooc. The way we envision, and Gail should rectify us if you are in the wrong direction, but that the target audience would be practitioners who are working in the field anywhere in the world on the issues of our relevance. So most of you, except me, so I hope that clarifies, Megan. All right, so any questions on the questions that we are asking you?
They've got 15 minutes, so 5 minutes a question. So just go for it, guys. You know, the questions are there to guide you. Yeah.
Thank you.
You can grab any of these guys to the table if you want more explanation as well. Yeah. So please make sure you have someone taking notes.
Well, so the way that we like that is a tree and value. The way they set it up was
Yes. I can go there.
Is it like literally what are the topics, or is it you're learning
You are learning.
insights?
Insights. Yes.
It's insights. Reflecting on topics will be the what else do you want
Okay, so how come should you part of that you need to look at some of the things that are went downhill. That's just triggered by so that is where you can sometimes I jump into these things. But some interests, some literatures, And again, it's just one piece of Ohio State University or social, Penn State social university that's public loaned and started so they set up this culture this year with their own experts and realize that go in for the nursing. I think people have a lot more how to optimize the
So just generally.
Just waiting for the session to get over. Out at this table, the last time I saw. But the tables are good, right? It's conversation. Part of what don't be too harsh.
You have 5 to 7 minutes left, so please make sure you're covering all of the questions. Okay, a couple more minutes to wrap up your discussion. Okay. So don't worry if you have not completed everything. You still have the option to email these guys. But I was just wondering if there any reflection, just anything really significant you like to share. I just open the floor for 5 minutes. Yeah, just forward the slide by the traditional way. Okay, are you with me? Are you with me still? Or are you still in Mooc land? Okay, can I have some silence? A little bit of silence so we can hear each other speak? Okay, so thank you so much for that feedback. So I assume you have got a note taker on your table. Can you put your hand up if you are going to be responsible to send us the notes?
By email, that will be great.
By email. Who on your table is responsible to send the notes? Amanda? What about the... Oh, okay, you're that table, Marcus? Yeah. Okay, I just want to make sure there is someone sending the notes. Probably the person from traffic. Yeah? And I just wonder, anything... I just open the floor for 5 minutes. Anything significant you'd like to share? Really important that you just want to bring to the attention of the whole group from your discussion? No?
Going once, going twice.
Okay.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of experience of online learning, including Mooc applications, and I think one of the main points was that this really needs to be a course that's optimised for the online environment, and to build in the opportunities for engagement of participants and look at having very hands-on activity-based content, and the engagement could even also involve a moderator, and take advantage of online features that can be as interactive as possible to hold people's attention, but also to get that group competition. There's even examples of gamifying, I think it's a new word I just learned, gamifying the Mooc so that there is actually points for participation and a leaderboard, and people are aspiring to be the most interactive that they can be relative to the peer group during the course. So that's just some thoughts from this group.
Any other ideas you like to share from the tables, apart from the notes?
Specifically relating to what content and format you would like to see appear.
Okay. Gone. You want to share your email address?
I already.
Okay. So they're going to write to you about this, is it? Okay. So this is not just for note takers, right? This is also that if you suddenly have a bright idea, you can write to Samir and tell him your bright idea, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. It's the end! Are you sad?
Yeah.
You're so sad. Okay. So that you aren't so sad, Steve is going to say a few words of wisdom to make you not so sad. So I'm going to hand over to Steve.